Okay, so welcome everyone. This is, as you know, the start of two things. The basic program that is beginning again here at Tupten Norberling in Santa Fe, and then also the start of the initial course in this, which I'm very honored to teach, to be able to share with all of you this wonderful text by Lama Tsongkhapa, which I'll talk about a little bit more tonight. Let's go ahead and begin with some prayers, and then we'll do a short meditation. 1 second, I'll get that up on the screen. Hope I need screen sharing. Is that you, Sheila? Okay. Anyway, thank all of you on Zoom for coming on from so many different places. I can tell some of you I know from having taught you before and been with you before. So happy that you're all joining today. So let's go ahead. Again, we're going to do just a few prayers. Let me see if I can find where the screen is for that one. There it is. Okay, let me share that now. We're going to begin with the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, which we'll do 3 times. Again, the source of all of these teachings is the Buddha. And so we are always trying to be mindful of that being the source of this amazing, these wisdom teachings. And so as we recite this, think about that we are paying homage to the Buddha. But moreover, we're also kind of identifying that we all can become the Buddha. That's the potential that we all have. And so as we recite all these amazing qualities that the Buddha possesses, these are in our own continuum in the future. That's why we're here, so we can become just like the Buddha. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. So we'll do the short mandala offering. We're just going to recite this in English. Again, most of you are familiar with this prayer, but we're trying to visualize the entire phenomenal world transformed into a beautiful Buddha paradise, kind of our future Buddha realm, but also the Buddha realm that all beings will eventually inhabit. And we're making that vast, pure offering to all the holy beings to receive their blessings, their guidance, so we can accomplish the realizations of the path. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And then finally, refuge and bodhicitta. We'll recite it first in English and then twice with the chanting. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la jang chu pardu dakni kyabsu chi daki chunyan gipe sonam gi dola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodang soki choknam la jang chu bardu dakni kyabsu chi Daki chunyan gipe sanam gi dola penchir sangye druparsho. All right, let's do a short meditation. So at the beginning of each of these classes, I like to do a little meditation. We won't spend long, but the first few minutes, we're just going to focus the mind using the breath. And most of you, I'm sure, have a technique you already use with the breath. If you need a suggestion, it's kind of useful to tune into the sensation that we feel around the tip of the nose, especially at the end of the day. If it is your end of the day, some people are coming in perhaps from places where it isn't the end of the day, but the mind tends to be a little more sleepy, tired at this time of day. So bringing your awareness up to this upper point in the body is really quite helpful. But just bring your awareness to the breath. Whenever you see that the mind has wandered, gently guide the mind back to the breath. So we'll do this in silence for a few minutes, and then I will lead you in a short reflection to strengthen our motivation of bodhicitta before we begin. Now let's set our motivation for our time together. In this course, we're going to be exploring this, again, wonderful text that sets out the entire stages of the path that will help us to achieve the state of enlightenment. And we all have that potential. We all have minds that are fundamentally pure. Right now, our minds, however, have these temporary obscurations. The path to enlightenment is one in which we go about the process of removing everything that obscures our own mind down to the subtlest levels so we can become an omniscient being, a Buddha, being who can then help others to attain that same state. So it is important that we kind of moisten our motivation to become a Buddha with the minds of compassion and loving kindness. Just as we ourselves want to be happy and don't want to suffer, and moreover, each of us still continues to be thwarted in finding true happiness and continues to suffer, the situation of other sentient beings is identical. So we generate a compassion and a love that embraces all beings, ourselves included, wanting each and every being to attain what is their birthright, what they can fulfill in their own minds and hearts. This state of Buddhahood, this full development of our potential. So generate that mind that aspires to become a Buddha, to help others to do this work. This way, everything that we do tonight, and we can even set this motivation as one that will carry us through this whole course. We want to do all of this work in examining this topic so we can become enlightened quickly and then lead all sentient beings to that same state. And you can open your eyes fully and we'll begin. So again, welcome to this first class. I want to thank especially Venerable Dundrup, who's done a lot of work in setting everything up for this. And then there are a lot of other folks in the FPMT behind the scenes, as well as here at the Buddha Center, Tupten Nobeling. So I want to thank all of them as well. So again, the few things I want to do tonight. Tonight is going to be more introductory, simply because we need to sort of make our entrance into this topic. Going forward, we'll be spending much more of the time focused on the actual text, but I'm hoping to get to a little bit of the text tonight even. Maybe only like a paragraph or two, but enough to sort of taste that. So that's the fourth thing I want to do tonight. The first thing I want to do is to talk a little bit about the basic program of the FPMT. FPMT basic program has been around quite a while, and many of you are familiar, but I just want to make sure that people know what this program is about and some of what's entailed in studying it, though again, you can approach this in whatever way you prefer. There's no requirements from that vantage point. Secondly, I want to talk a bit about the stages of the path genre, the Lamrim. I'm going to base that and even share the same slides that I did back in August when I did a little session that some of you were at called The Timeless Relevance of the Lamrim. Again, when I went back to it, I said, I want to share some of it. And then it turns out that I really thought every slide in there was useful. So I'm going to try to go through that a little more quickly because some of you have seen it, and especially because we're about to enter into this study. So we don't need to maybe have quite as much of a taster in that regard. So that'll be the second thing that I do. The third thing, I want to make sure that I go over all of the materials and things that you have available that are accessible to you so that you're clear on where those will be and what's happening with that. And then lastly, do a little bit of the text. So that's kind of my plan for the evening. And again, I hope you kind of hang in there with this. I was hoping to do introductions of everyone, but I think with the number of folks that are on Zoom and the folks in the Gompa here, it might take the entire hour and a half for us to do introductions. We'll find some time for that in the future. Just so you know, my plan for these classes going forward is to do an hour and a half of a lecture of sorts, kind of beginning with the prayers and the short meditation. And then we'll take a really short break, like 5 minutes or so. And then I'll be giving you some guidance to do discussion. So online in Zoom, there will be a breakout into discussion groups if there are too many folks. We want to break it down to groups of maybe 3 or 4 where people can actually spend some time discussing what I had covered that evening. And you're welcome, if you don't want to participate in that, you're certainly welcome to bow out at an hour and a half in when I finish the lecture. But I'm hoping some of you will come and stay for that and be a part of that. I might mention that in the monasteries, as you probably know, Tibetan monasteries, they do debate. The saying goes that the monks and nuns learn like 25% of what they carry away from their instruction from a master. Another 25% comes from their own individual study. 50% comes from debate. Debate is a process of interaction and saying what you know and holding particular positions and then seeing the holes in them and what have you. It's a very wonderful way to learn material. We don't really have the opportunity to do it as much in the West, but we have discussion. Discussion is an opportunity for you to share what you heard and get feedback from others as to whether that is what they heard as well. It's interesting. We can have, 50 some people in the class, and everyone might hear something slightly different in terms of how they interpret the teachings I'm giving. Sometimes it's not that different, but nonetheless, we need to kind of fine tune our understanding. So this will be an opportunity for you to do that with that last half hour. And that'll be again going forward. Tonight, I don't know if I'm going to have time for that based on what I want to cover, but we'll see. And if I don't have time, if it looks like I'm running a little late, then we will take a short break about an hour in, because I know it's very hard, particularly in Zoom, to sit in for 2 hours of a lecture. So that's the plan. Let me go ahead and begin with sharing with you some slides I put together in regard to the basic program of the FPMT. This program, again, has been around quite a while. When I first started my studies with the FPMT back in 1996, there was talk of it then. Lama Zopa Rinpoche had a number of geshes as well who kind of put together this program. As it says here, this was devised particularly by Lama Zopa Rinpoche for Dharma students who wish to progress beyond introductory courses and are ready to commit to more in-depth study and practice. And that, again, is interpret that at your own level. Some of you may want to just simply sit in on the lectures, be kind of in that listener mode. That's perfectly fine. But I'm hoping that some of you will want to engage more fully, and I'll talk about how we do that. And again, Venerable Dondrup has given you some information on how to do the studies a little more seriously. The second bullet point, it offers a text-based introduction to the philosophical aspects of the Tibetan Buddhist Gelugpa tradition. Lama Tsongkhapa, who's the composer of our text, is the founder of the Gelugpa tradition. Essentially, this text-based study, some of you who've been around the FPMT maybe haven't done that quite as much. But nonetheless, we do have many teachers who do teach from texts. Geshe Sherab, for example, taught the essence of refined gold when he was here in the months before he left. It's another Lamrim text. When you're dealing with kind of a text, then that becomes the centerpiece. And so my role is to elucidate the words that are in Lama Tsongkhapa's text and to make connections and what have you for you to help you to get deeper appreciation for the text. The text can certainly be read on its own. There's no problem there. It just does help to have a more kind of organized structure around getting into the text and working with it. So again, this is what the entire basic program is about, is text-based studies that are there to help us to go deeper into the material that is taught in this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. There are a number of components of the FPMT basic program. The main one that we're doing right here is the study component. There are 9 basic program core curriculum principal subjects. This one, Stages of the Path, is often taught as the first one. There are also 3 optional supplementary subjects, which sometimes are taught, sometimes are not taught. The 9 core curriculum are really the heart of the basic program. There are subject completion tests. I might mention that for this program in particular, I've divided the entire course into 4 parts so that we don't I'm not going to try to have you do one big test at the end of all four of these parts because it's a rather long text. Instead, I'm going to be doing shorter tests that will be in the middle. At the end of each of these four parts, we'll have some time for people to do the tests and for me to get them graded, which always takes a little bit of time, but nonetheless, that is how we're going to go about this particular subject, is there won't be a one test, but rather four tests that will test your knowledge and kind of gives, again, a way for you to assess your own understanding and learning, even if you don't do this for a kind of certification. I'll talk about certification shortly. There's also discussion, homework, and reading assignments. I'll talk about those a little bit later tonight as well. There's the 3-month final review for those who want to take the final exam and get certification. And again, there'll be more information on that. The final exam itself needs to be passed in order to have the full completion of it. Again, this is for folks who really do want to do it at a deeper level in terms of the certification. This may not apply to you, and that's perfectly fine. But nonetheless, I'm kind of introducing all of you to these ideas. Another component is meditation and retreat. I'm going to try to give meditation assignments, particularly as we get more into the deeper subjects that are meant to be investigated in meditation more thoroughly, as well as attending guided meditations when we can offer them. Again, we don't necessarily always have time for that. Practice days, short retreats. I might talk to Venerable Dundrup about how we might make some of that happen in the future so that we can have some time here and engaging in some level of retreat. Know that for the completion of the entire program, a 3-month Lamrim retreat, which can also be a 1-month Lamrim retreat for those who are doing the online certificate, this is a requirement. And it just to assure that people have more time in retreat investigating the Lamrim. And I'll mention now, it's in a later slide as well, that you can have 3 1-month Lamrim retreats. It's just, again, most of you may not have done that type of retreat, but it gives you an opportunity to be with the Lamrim day in and day out for 90 days to, investigate it and get your head around it in meditation as well. The third component is a practice component, and this means behaving according to the conduct and practice criteria that's formulated by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's in a document that you have access to at the website that I'll show you in a bit, where I think you've been directed to already. Venerable Dundrup has put together, again, a website page where you can have access to a number of the pieces of information around the basic program. So that criteria is primarily abiding by the 5 lay precepts, which most of you are familiar with. Not killing, not stealing, not engaging in adultery or other kind of harmful forms of sexual behavior. The 4th one, not lying. And then the 5th one, not engaging in alcohol and intoxicants. So again, these are primarily to be followed in terms of your time here together, but it's also you're encouraged to practice according to those 5 lay precepts in your own everyday life as much as you can. The 4th one is a service component. We really would encourage people to assist with any assigned tasks that support the running of the center and of the program. I mean, oftentimes when these programs are run at a residential center where people are engaging in them all, day in and day out studies, not just once a week like we're doing here, there are so many tasks that need to be done to run a program, right? Because it's a residential community that's all going through this. We don't have quite the level of tasks, but no doubt over time, some things will come to the surface where we do need some help and assistance. So if you can offer to do that, that's also a part of this program. The last is a training component, engaging in training opportunities, such as helping with guiding meditations, preparing discussion questions, leading small discussion groups, preparing course materials, contributing to practice days and leading short retreats, and so on. So again, that's something that we may have the opportunity for. I might mention that this program does have the possibility, if one does the full basic program certificate, of applying to be a registered teacher in the FPMT. It's not to say, again, that that is for everyone, or is something that you're guaranteed to be able to do, but it is a possibility, and the training component will help with that, giving people an opportunity to do tests that are involved in, getting your head around the material in more ways that lead to having better skills as a teacher as well. Now, going on to the other thing, the subject completion requirements for certification. Since we are in this one subject, we have Venerable Dundrup has set up again a page where the basic program requirements set out by Thupten Norbu Ling are clarified to a large degree. Let me go ahead and pull that up so that you can take a look at that page if you haven't visited it before. And I can put the page into the chat box so you can pull it up and bookmark it and come back to it. But again, I think most of you have seen this. I don't know who that guy is on the bottom of the screen there, but hope he doesn't distract you. So let's see what is all on here later on is about the basic program behavior requirement. There's key information in terms of the duration of this, course access, and so on. I'm not going to go through all of this. There's certification requirements, which are set out very clearly here in terms of what's all entailed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I mean, I just want to give you this. There's the conduct guidelines. Let me go ahead and click on that so you have that come up. Again, you can link here to this wonderful sheet that gives you all the criteria that are involved. Again, primarily the 5 lay precepts, but it gives you a good idea of what's involved in that. So you can find everything that you need here, find the full curriculum of the courses, the 9 courses that are the core curriculum, including the one that we are going into tonight. So that is there for you to explore. Let's go back to my slides and we'll carry on with the additional information in terms of the subject requirements. The attendance requirements at TNL are as follows. If you are going for the full basic program certification, again, it's very difficult to get this because it does require 80% attendance in person at the center. And I know most of you are not at the center, you're online. So you by default would be in the next category. But when the teaching is online only due to teacher travel, which is coming up next month, I'll be traveling a little bit into March. If I'm traveling and I'm going to be teaching from a distance, so it's only online, or if there's bad weather, like as we're on the verge of getting here in Santa Fe right now, and so on, anytime that we have to cancel the in-person class and I'm teaching online, attending the teaching live online will count towards that requirement. So you have to get 80% essentially live teaching in person when in person is offered, and then online when that's the only thing that's being offered. Of course, there's also the idea that you would then do the makeup classes, hopefully keep up with the classes so that Venerable Dundrup has let me know that generally within 24 hours, the recording will be posted. So you'll be able to access it fairly quickly. And then you can find time, hopefully within, I'm sorry. On YouTube, exactly. We have the YouTube page that you can find the link to at TNLSF up in the upper right-hand corner of the website. So all you need to do is go there, and hopefully it'll be on the main page because the more current classes are generally there. So again, that's how any of you that miss classes can catch up by trying to watch those again before the next class. If you are going for the online basic program certification, that requires also 80% attendance, but it's either by joining the online sessions live or through watching the video recordings of sessions that are missed within that week of after the session has occurred. So again, for this one, for example, would be watching it before next Wednesday. So that's the idea behind it so that you can kind of keep up with that. And Venerable Dundrup will inform you more about how that will be kept track of and whatever. These 2 different levels of certification do, of course, entail different possibilities in terms of those who do the full BP certification, I alluded to this earlier, do have the potential to apply to be a registered teacher in the FPMT. And again, I wish it was different myself, and we'll see. I don't know, maybe things will change at some time. But the idea for those who are online is unfortunately that's not a requirement that a possibility that we can offer to you with the requirement that way. Again, if you have an individual concern about this, though, please, write to me or write to Venerable Dundrup, and we'll kind of take a look at things and see what might be managed. I'm not in charge of all of that aspect of it. I'm here as a teacher of this program, and I don't kind of monitor, make any decisions around what's happening at the sort of FPMT level, the upper level. Sean, you do have a question? And neither does Venerable Dundrup. But again, feel free to write to us if this is a big concern to you. And, it's good for those to be voiced so that we then have kind of some things we can talk to people at that level about. Sean, were you going to share something? I'm sorry. You unmute. We should be able to hear you. Not. Do you have something, Sean, or should we go on? Looks like we go on. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the slide. Oh, there you
Hey,
are, Sean.
sorry,
Okay.
I couldn't unmute.
Yes.
I was being blocked. I was just wondering, what was the purpose then of the basic program online versus just auditing it? Because it doesn't sound like I get any benefit from going through the whole process. There's no like added benefit of other than me learning.
Well,
It
again,
would
if
have been
those
the
who are
same
just
if I audited it.
Mhm. Well, those who are just auditing or in that listening category or whatever, I think that's what you labeled it, Venerable Dunder. There's certainly some benefit to coming and attending the classes and hearing the teachings and so on. There's greater benefit certainly to our own practice when we do all the meditations and take the exam and do all the other things that are involved, even if we don't have the opportunity to become a registered teacher. I mean, registered teachers, it's a wonderful thing to do. Trust me, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I'm very happy doing it. And it's great that we have the opportunity for folks to do that. But it's not the be all and end all of it. The be all and end all is for us to work on our own minds to be able to become enlightened for the sake of other beings. And so, to what degree we can advance that through participating, even at the online certification level, is useful. But as I was saying, if this is a sticky point for you, please feel free to articulate that in an email to us, and then we've got some things that I can put forward. Um, I mean, I will say right now I'm planning to meet with Olga, who is the woman who's in charge of the basic program, hopefully next week. And so anything that you say might be useful for me to just approach this subject. I don't know how set in stone some of this stuff is because I've never challenged any of it, but we'll see. And I don't want to give any promises on that front. But if this is something that you want to voice your concerns about, please do. So thanks, Sean. All right, let's go back to the slides and continue on so we can make sure we get through this material tonight. The program completion requirements. The previous slide was the subject completion requirements. So a subject is this text, for example, with the stages of the path course. For the entire program, there's the completion again of all 9 core curriculum subjects based on the requirements set by the center. So again, you have those requirements. I don't know if this will stay 80% for every course of this. Is that the plan, Venerable Dundra? I think so. So he's nodding his head. So again, the requirements that are set in terms of the attendance, in terms of the doing the homework and all the various things that are involved, well, then those are, again, something that is part of finishing the entire program. There's also participation in the 3-month final review, which can be done in person or online, and having passed the final exam for the basic program. That covers all 9 subjects. Then there's also, again, the retreat component, completion of a 3-month Lamrim retreat or 3 one-month Lamrim retreats. And again, that is a 1-month Lamrim retreat for the online basic program certification. So that previous certification that I was talking about in terms of attendance, the requirement for retreat is lesser for the online BP certification. I think that's it for that. Let me check and see if there are any questions on basic program and what it's about. Keep in mind, there is that third option that Sean was mentioning, which is kind of auditing, listening, and that's perfectly fine. Again, I don't want to make people feel uninvited because I put out all that criteria and what have you. You're welcome to do the program in whatever way suits you. All right. But any questions? Okay. All right. That covers our first main thing that we want to do tonight. The second thing is to do a little bit of a kind of repeat of the slides that I had presented back in August. As I mentioned, I called this originally the timeless relevance of the Lamrim, the stages of the path. But here in terms of our agenda that I put together, this is the introduction to the text and the study of the stages of the path. So this is really to give you some grounding, especially those of you who might be new to this type of study and to the approach that is being used here of the Lamrim. Hopefully you aren't completely new to it, but I'm going to start with just a little quote from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our spiritual director who passed away almost 3 years ago now. The whole idea of meditating, reading, studying Dharma, all the essence is to actualize the Lamrim path, the path to enlightenment, so that you can achieve enlightenment quicker. And then you can free the sentient beings from the oceans of samsaric suffering quicker and bring them to enlightenment quicker. That should be your main goal or aim, your purpose in life. So just reiterating what I was saying in answer to Sean's question, I mean, this is really the main objective. This is why we're here. Rinpoche's kind advice, it's nice if we can do it and get certification, or if we can get a teacher, registered teacher, permission to do that at some point. But the main goal is to achieve enlightenment so we can benefit others. So anyway, that's kind of to get us into the ballpark of what this text is really about, the incredible value of this text. I've divided the agenda for this into 5 parts. The teachings of the Buddha, just to touch on this really briefly, though again, this is something hopefully where most of us are familiar with. A little on Lama Atisha and the literary genre of the Lamrim, though again, we'll go into that a little more detail next week when we talk about Lama Atisha. Lama Tsongkhapa himself, the composer of this text, and his expositions of the Lamrim. The 18 Lamrim commentaries, just very briefly on that, and then the particular significance of Lama Tsongkhapa's middle-length treatise that we're going to be studying. Okay, the Buddha. The Buddha himself, as you know, lived some 2,600 years ago. He gave his initial teaching at the age of 35 on the Four Noble Truths, and then went on to teach the Dharma extensively for 45 more years of his life before he exhibited a parinirvana, a passing into nirvana. But he left behind, obviously, an amazing legacy of teachings. There are the sutra teachings that are referred to as kind of the main discourses of the Buddha, and the Lamrim encapsulates those in essence, and usually tacks on at the very end a reference to the other sort of discourses the Buddha gave, which are the tantric teachings. This course will not touch on Tantra except at the very, very end as kind of a footnote. There is an entire course in the basic program dedicated to the study of the progression that one makes on the Tantric path. But for the Sutra path, again, the Buddha taught plenty of these teachings in an open way that were written down by his followers and that have become the corpus of the Buddha's teachings. It is said in some presentations that the Buddha gave 84,000 teachings to counter the 84,000 afflictions of beings. And I think we've got sometimes more than that, but nonetheless, regardless of the exact number, the Buddha gave many diverse teachings on many subjects, making it challenging for an individual practitioner to know specifically how to practice them. I mean, this is the challenge that we face. In the English language, most of these sutras, these discourses are not even translated, right? We have some that are. Here in Thupten Norboling, we're blessed by having the 2 sets of, the first is the sutras, the Kangyur, and then the Tengyur, the treatises in the Indian language that were given. I think primarily Indian. There might be some Tibetan compositions in there. I'm not sure. I don't recall. But anyway, there's this amazing corpus of teachings that you might think, well, I'm going to go through all those wonderful teachings the Buddha gave and all the great commentaries on those teachings. You'd probably spend your whole life just translating them from Sanskrit into English and then trying to figure out what they're about and how to practice them. This is a problem, So this is what the Lamrim provides us with. So let's go back to the slides. The next slide essentially gives us, the answer to that. So the teachings encompass kind of 2 main bodies of teachings that we can point to. The individual vehicle teachings, the Hinayana, as it's referred to more classically, traditionally. It's mainly practiced by the 2 practitioners who are aspiring to attain their own liberation from samsara, what are called the hearers, Shravakas, and the solitary realizers or Pratyeka Buddhas. We will see those folks surface here and there in the Lamrim, but they're not the main target for the Lamrim. The main target for the Lamrim is the universal vehicle, the Mahayana. mainly practiced by bodhisattvas who aspire to attain complete enlightenment or Buddhahood. So again, these are kind of, when we look at the teachings the Buddha gave, the individual vehicle teachings, the Hinayana, were mainly translated into the Pali language, and the universal vehicle mainly in the Sanskrit language. So we have all these amazing, again, teachings that are out there, and we have even a further division of the Mahayana into the perfection vehicle, the Paramitayana, and the tantric vehicle, the Vajrayana. As I mentioned earlier, the Tantra teachings are their own sort of set of teachings. We're not going to be looking at them as part of these teachings, but the perfection vehicle, the Paramitayana, encapsulates the sutra teachings the Buddha gave for bodhisattvas in particular to achieve their goal using those teachings. So essentially, what we find in the Lamrim, and we're going to see this unfold as we look at Lama Atisha, is that there's a need for a way to get our heads around everything the Buddha taught, in kind of getting the essence of what the Buddha taught in terms of how it applies to an individual practitioner. This is what the Lamrim is set up to do. This is why Lama Atisha composed the text that was the kind of predecessor to the text that we are looking at in this course. So let's take a look at Lama Atisha and how he devised this initial genre of the Lamrim that we are using as kind of a template for our approach to the Buddha's teachings. Atisha Dipamkara, as he's known, lived about 1,000 years ago. In 982 to 1054, he was from India, but did come to Tibet and taught in Tibet for a number of years before he passed away. He studied both Sutra and Tantra with many great masters, was one of the abbots at Vikramashila monastery in India. We're going to hear more about Lama Atisha, as I said, next week when we kind of begin our survey of the text where Lama Tsongkhapa talks about Atisha. He was invited to Tibet to reinvigorate the Buddha Dharma there, specifically with the request to summarize and clarify the key elements distilled from the Buddha's teachings, the Kangyur and the Indian commentaries, which explain them, the Tengyur. So I think it is just Indian commentaries, as all of the great masters in Tibet, of course, commented often on the Indian commentaries. But anyway, that's kind of what Lama Tsongkhapa is doing. He's commenting on Atisha's text that was composed. To fulfill that request, to give the people of Tibet, and of course everyone in the world, a way to approach the Buddha's teachings set out in a very practical, easy to follow way, he composed the lamp for the path to enlightenment. The lamp for the path to enlightenment is said to be kind of the progenitor of the Lamrim tradition. Atisha's lamp became the prototype and main textual source for the Lamrim genre. Now, sometimes His Holiness, other great masters teach on that text, the lamp for the path to enlightenment. What's kind of interesting is in and of itself, it's, I don't know how many verses, 60, 70 verses, something like that. It only alludes to the 3 levels of the stages of the path, the Lamrim, at the very beginning. It doesn't go into detailed teachings in the way that Lama Tsongkhapa's text does. And that's essentially what Lama Tsongkhapa's text is meant to do, is to give us an elucidation of these 3 main levels of practice. And I'm going to go into those very shortly. Lama Atisha is, again, the kind of the grandfather of all of this, great-great-great-grandfather of the Lamrim. And it's amazing. When I first encountered Lamrim teachings, I'd been studying in Tibetan Buddhism for a few years, and I found them to be unbelievable in terms of giving me an entire structure of how to approach Buddhist practice. The most notable element of the Lamrim that Atisha devised then was its focus on these 3 individuals, these 3 sort of stages of the path. These 3 encompass all the aims of the Buddha's teachings, both the initial aim, which is a temporal goal of attaining or gaining a good rebirth, what is often shorthand called high status, to have the high status of being a human, for example, that we all have that are here listening to these teachings, as well as the ultimate goals of liberation for oneself from samsara, and enlightenment, the complete state of Buddhahood. Again, most of you are familiar with those 2 terms. We delineate them that way in this tradition. Liberation referring to the goal that is set by the hearers and solitary realizers that I mentioned earlier that are following the individual vehicle, and enlightenment, the goal of the bodhisattvas who follow the universal vehicle. Those together are often referred to as definite goodness because when you attain them, it is definite that you will continue to have that goodness, those great qualities. You cannot degenerate from liberation and enlightenment, but you can fall from a good rebirth. So essentially, that's the differentiation between these. But these are the three goals that are set out according to these three beings. Those who first want to achieve just good high status, a good rebirth, those who want to achieve liberation, and those who want to achieve enlightenment, Buddhahood. This is a little quote from Ignacio Cabazon and Roger Jackson in their book on Tibetan literature, studies, and genre. A Lamrim proper is a work that expounds the stages of the path of the three individuals. That is, it aims at being a complete introduction to spirituality, leading the student through the stages of the two lower spiritual orientations, or individuals who aspire for a better rebirth and for individual liberation, before reaching the highest level, that third level, that of the Mahayana great individual, who aspires to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all living beings. So again, this is what all Lamrim texts are about. And by the way, these words Lamrim, I think most of you are familiar with these. In Tibetan, Lam is path. Rim means stages or gradual. The idea being that we move gradually in a way of developing our minds. A path is a consciousness, a way of changing our minds all the way to the state of enlightenment. So these are the initial verses of the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, where Lama Atisha sets out these three levels. I'm not going to go into great explanation of these, but I just want you to get sort of the original source. This is why we're studying this and how we have the origins in Lama Atisha's text to be able to go forward with these types of teachings. He starts off by saying, understand that there are three kinds of persons because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities. I shall write clearly, distinguishing their individual characteristics. So again, even though he says it, he writes clearly in just the next few verses. He doesn't really go into the great detail that Lama Tsongkhapa is going into in the text that we'll be studying. Know that those who by whatever means seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of psychic existence are persons of the least capacity. Of course, my teacher, Geshe Jampa Gyatso, when he would teach on this, he'd point out that we can say there's like a lesser small person, this first level, this person of the least capacity. There's some who don't even have a spiritual path, who essentially are attached to the pleasures of this life. That's very limited, and that's what most beings, unfortunately, are all about. We want to at least be kind of looking for the continued good existences, a good rebirth in samsara. That's the first level of the stages of the path. The person of the least capacity at least puts energy into getting a good rebirth. Secondly, those who seek peace for themselves alone, turning away from worldly pleasures and avoiding destructive actions, are said to be of middling capacity. Those who say, I've been in samsara way too long. I need to be free of all of this once and for all. Therefore, I'm going to engage in actions, turning away from samsara, turning towards what will lead to liberation. That's the second level. Again, we're going to get teachings on all of these levels to a great degree in the months to come. Those who, through their personal suffering, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. These are the bodhisattvas. These are the beings who aspire to become a Buddha so they can end the suffering of all beings. So this is, again, where we ideally want to be and what we want to practice. But nonetheless, Atisha, in his wisdom, saw that there are kind of three aspirants, three levels of individuals who can have their own goals within the Buddha Dharma. And Lama Tsongkhapa went on to kind of refine that to some degree. This chart just gives you a very brief overview of what we're going to be looking at throughout these months, starting with the preliminary topics, which will be covered in this first course, relying on the Guru and recognizing this perfect human rebirth. These two are covered towards the latter part of this course, but are definitely a part of it. And they are the foundation, the preliminary topics that we need to fully engage in the three levels. The first, the person of the lowest capacity with the motivation to attain a favorable rebirth. They have their specific teachings. Again, this will be the next part of the course, part of the next part of the course. Then the person of middling capacity that wants to attain self-liberation. is the middle capable being with their respective teachings. And we, again, will look at that in the second part of the stages of the path that will come after we finish this first part. Then we'll go on to look in the remainder of the course at the third level, the person of great capacity, who has the motivation to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. And so again, most of you are familiar with this. I'm just giving you this as an introduction to how the Lamrim is structured. So again, for the first course, we'll be looking at the very top there, the preliminary topics, as well as what precedes that, which gives us information on the meditation session and how to work with the teachings and so on. And then we'll go on in the second part to cover the lower and middle capable being. And then we'll go on in the last two parts to do the initial teachings of the great capable being, and then the final ones that are the more difficult teachings. So we kind of build up to the level of complexity that's presented in the Lamrim. Let's talk a little bit about Lama Tsongkhapa. He doesn't talk about himself in this text. He talks about Lama Atisha a bit, but obviously it's good to know who this person was and why we have him at the center of so many of our studies in the FPMT and in the Geluk tradition. Talk a little bit about what he wrote in terms of his expositions of the Lamrim. Lama Tsongkhapa lived from 1357 to 1419. I have here, he's an unparalleled scholar and practitioner who revitalized many sutra and tantra lineages and the monastic tradition in Tibet. What happened was you have almost kind of three main periods, if you will, of the Dharma kind of going through an invigoration. The initial sort of introduction of the teachings, which happened in like the 6th, 7th century. Then you have Lama Atisha showing up to give kind of a new injection of teachings. And then Lama Tsongkhapa himself kind of doing a sort of Protestant Reformation of the teachings, if you will. That is the tradition that the Dalai Lamas are raised in primarily, that they are taught in. But the Dalai Lamas also, of course, study the other traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. If you don't know, there are 4 traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, and the Geluk tradition that he founded is the last of the 4 to form. And sometimes even the more traditional Bon religion is included because it has become very Buddhist in its way of approaching things. It's kind of included as a footnote as a sort of 5th school of Tibetan Buddhism by some people. But nonetheless, the Geluk tradition is one of the more popular, perhaps, traditions in Tibetan Buddhism, but it's not about popularity. It's really about what teachings speak to you. And for many of you, you do find that this Geluk tradition that Lama Tsongkhapa presented is useful. He lived at a time, this is kind of a unique point that is set out in the biography of him that Thupten Jinpa, I think maybe this wasn't in the biography, it might be in another text, but Thupten Jinpa put this forward, and I had not heard this. He lived at a time when the translation of the Kangyur and the Tengyur, remember those are the initial sutras, discourses of the Buddha, and the Indian commentaries on them, when those translations into Tibetan had largely been completed, thus making him one of the first Tibetan masters with access to the entire canons of Indian Buddhism. You know, in the initial centuries after Tibetan Buddhism was introduced in that first wave, they didn't even have the language to study most of these texts in. They were bringing the texts in, and there were these great translators who translated it into a Tibetan language. So then they were able to get their heads around what the teachings were, and that translation had been pretty much complete by the time Lama Tsongkhapa appeared. He was deeply taken by the elegance and completeness of Lama Atisha's lamp and composed a number of Lamrim texts of varying length, commenting on that root text. Because again, the root text is very sparse. As I said, those few verses are the main teachings on the 3 levels. The rest of the text is primarily on the Bodhisattva practices. These are a list of everything that can be kind of called the Lamrim texts that Lama Tsongkhapa composed. The first 3 are generally the 3 that are identified as the main ones. The Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path, written in 1402, the Lamrim Chenmo, it's in 3 volumes. It is a great treatise. It is, I think the text we're studying, the statistic is that it's about 40% of the length of the Great Treatise. So the Great Treatise is substantially larger. The middle length treatise that we are going to be studying, which as you can see was written 13 years later, just 2 years before Lama Tsongkhapa's passing. So it is seen to be one of the last sort of pronouncements of Lama Tsongkhapa in terms of especially the wisdom teachings. We're going to see that shortly. The concise treatise on the stages of the path, which is often referred to as a song of spiritual experience. I don't know the date when that was composed, but it's only about 24, 25 verses. It's not a very long text at all. That's sometimes called the small treatise of Lama Tsongkhapa. The other three are kind of where he taught in the Lamrim in even more condensed ways or gave more personal instruction, what's called the three principal aspects of the path, which I won't talk about right now, composed in 1398. The foundation of all good qualities, which does set out in kind of a glance meditation, the various levels of the various teachings within the three stages of the path. He also composed a few instructions on the Lamrim at the request of various individuals, and those, I don't think, and most of those have been translated into English. The first three have definitely, well, the last, the fourth and fifth have also been translated, obviously. What we're working with is a translation that was just published a few years back. And another reason why I wanted to teach this is because it's in a much more refined and edited edition than what it was when I taught it previously some years ago. Lama Tsongkhapa emphasized, this is an important point, that the framework of the Lamrim was not presenting the path of three different types of persons, but rather was presenting a graduated course to enlightenment from the perspective of a single practitioner whose aim is to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. And this is Tibetan Jimpa in this introduction to this text. But essentially what this is referring to is that even though we talk about these three levels as having kind of three different goals, and you can have some practitioners who see that maybe their practice of Buddhism is really limited to just creating the causes for a good rebirth. Or perhaps they really, and many people certainly are, interested only in their own liberation. The way that they are set out in the Lamrim and the way Lama Tsongkhapa emphasizes these teachings is that they are all teachings for a single practitioner to proceed through. The analogy that's sometimes used here is Venerable Rabin often uses this, is the way we have traditional education set up in our school system, right? Here in the United States, we have an initial level that we call elementary school usually. And then we have something in the middle that can be sort of a high school or intermediate level education, what have you. And then we go on to university level, right? Well, the idea is that in order to aspire to go to university and study at that level, you have to go through the lower education. You have to actually apply those teachings to yourself and your own understanding before you can get to the place where you have the capacity to take on a much larger body of knowledge. And when it comes to Buddhist practice, this is very much the case. We start off with the practices that are more fundamental, that are primarily rooted in our practice of morality. And then we add on practices related to concentration and wisdom and other much more complicated practices as we progress on the stages of the path. So this is not meant to be seen as kind of full stop at the end of each of these three levels, but rather someone has the main objective of the final level, getting all the way to complete enlightenment on the basis of proceeding through these three levels. So this is the idea that Lama Tsongkhapa particularly emphasized, which I think is once more important for us. This is why at the beginning of every one of these classes, we set our motivation of bodhicitta. So even when we are looking at the preliminary topics or the topics of the first level, the lower capacity, the least capacity individual, we are doing so with the overall aim of attaining Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. Let me take a little drink of tea here. Okay, let's go back to our slides and then I'll be checking, and this is not too many slides left, and then we'll see if there are any questions on this. So how this is worded then generally when we go back to that structure I showed you a few slides ago is that we see that the first two levels get kind of a different name. It's not just the stages of the path for the person of lowest capacity, it's those that are shared with the person of lowest capacity. It's like there are those people who are only going to be interested in getting a good rebirth, but we're going to share the path with them. We're going to do what they do to get their understanding, to build on it, to then go on to the stages of the path shared with the person of middling capacity, and then finally get to the stages of the path of the person of great capacity that are really only practiced by the person at that level. So we kind of pass through those, but they are essential to being able to develop all the realizations of the path. Without the other two levels, you can't really enter into the path of the great capable being. Now, many of us might think we could do that, just kind of jump in at the deep end, but it actually requires that we have the initial levels of understanding so that we can go on to progress in our own spiritual realization and understanding. So for Tsongkhapa, what is important is that you engage in your practice on the basis of your having an understanding of the overall framework of the Buddha's teaching and seeing the entire body of the path. The image here is one of a spiritual traveler embarking on a journey with a clear map of where he is going. Tsongkhapa sees the Lamrim framework of the paths of the three types of persons as offering exactly such a type of map. So this is really another way to kind of look at the Lamrim. It is a map, but it's more than, we always say the map is not the territory, right? It's the guide to the territory of our own minds in developing these realizations. So this is, again, Tsongkhapa's approach is very much about approaching it from that vantage point to give us that perspective. Briefly to touch on this, and we'll have a short break and then see if there are questions. There are 18 great kind of Lamrim commentaries that are set out. His Holiness the Dalai Lama some years ago in India, over the course of a number of years, gave the oral transmissions of all of these. In addition to the foundational texts by Tsongkhapa, many Lamrim commentaries have been written by Kadam and Geluk Lamas. A number of those commentaries, along with the root text of the lamp by Lama Atisha and the main Lamrim text of Lama Tsongkhapa, comprise what are called the 18 Lamrim commentaries. There's the link there to that. And by the way, I will be putting these slides out on your Google Drive, so you have access to them as well. I just mentioned that in passing. Don't need to know that much more about that, but know that, again, the middle length Lamrim by Tsongkhapa that we're studying is part of that. Actually, before I go into this last topic, let's take a short break because we've been sitting, for about an hour. Let's just take, if we can, 5 minutes. Hopefully it gives everyone opportunity to get up and stretch, use the restroom, whatever you might need to do, and then we will resume. Okay. Let me go back to the slides, I think. I did want to make one additional comment, and that's that, when I went through all that stuff around the requirements, sometimes what I do for folks who are still hesitating on that front of like, I don't know what level I want to participate at, I'm not sure I want to be that committed to it and what have you, is I just suggest, very gently, that you start off doing it and seeing what it's like. To go do all the readings and to do the homework and to do the meditations and whatever is involved. And then you just see how it's working for you. And if you find that, some months down the road or a month down the road, it's not really working for you, then that's fine. But if you find that it's really working and you're enjoying studying at that level and it's productive for you, then, you've got it already started. You don't have to go back and kind of pick it all up again and then catch up to where everybody else is at. So that would be my suggestion. Just a gentle suggestion. So, yeah. Oh, and Mary's mentioning, that Geshe Sherab did give a commentary on the Middle Length Lamrim some years ago. So again, that is something that you can probably, again, her questions about Philip Korku's translation. The one that we have now, and I'll talk about it, is a revised version of that is published by Wisdom. But yes, it's the definitely. The one, I'm not sure, Mary, if the one that you have was the final edition of that. So I'd have to check that. All right. Yeah, the published date on this one is 2021. But yeah, anyway. All right. Let's go ahead and go back to the text, or I'm sorry, to the slides where I'm talking again about the particular significance of Lama Tsongkhapa's middle length treatise. Again, this is kind of advertising publicity for the text in some regard. What is unique about studying this text? And in fact, what even led Lama Zopa Rinpoche to recommend that people study this rather than the great treatise or rather than some other Lamrim text, because there, again, are 18 great commentaries out there. It was composed roughly 13 years after the Great Treatise, as I mentioned earlier. It serves a number of purposes that go beyond the Great Treatise. First of all, it's more practice-oriented than the Great Treatise. To that point, Lama Tsongkhapa condensed most sections of the Great Treatise for ease of use and study by omitting the elaborate citations from Indian sources that he used in the earlier texts. I mean, that's the blessing of the great treatise, the Lamrim Chenmo, is that he has this wealth of all these citations from various Indian sources that makes it a very rich text to engage in and study. However, it is much longer and is not as applicable to ease of practice, as what the middle length Lamrim text is. It also included a revised presentation of the section on special insight, explicating the meaning of the Madhyamaka view. The middle way view is the view that is said to be set out most elaborately in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, and it's a very different presentation of the special insight into emptiness, that wisdom, those wisdom teachings in the middle length Lamrim versus the Lamrim Chenmo. This is a quote from Jeffrey Hopkins in a book that will be on your book list when we get to the final section of this course. Here, in the middle length Lamrim, Tsongkhapa presents the topic of wisdom in a far more accessible manner than he did 16 years earlier in his great treatise. He says 16, but I couldn't get the math to work out on that. But anyway, maybe when he started composing it. In other sections of the medium length exposition, he merely condenses the great treatise, but for the section on wisdom, the special insight section, which again will be a part of the fourth part of this course, he structures a new composition, with the exception that the beginning and the end are condensations of the great treatise. In the middle, it's very, very different. The most striking addition, he says, is the long section on the two truths, for which there is no corresponding section in the great treatise. Also, of 146 scriptural citations from Indian texts in the section on special insight in the medium length exposition, the middle length one we're studying, 76 are not found in the great treatise. It's kind of interesting, though overall he has less citations. He has more citations around the view of emptiness and this middle way view. So again, that's elaborating on the value of that section in particular in studying it. The medium length exposition of special insight has 70 quotations that are found in the special insight section of the great treatise, but in a radically different order. So that more than half of the quotations from Indian texts in the medium length exposition are not found in the great treatise, and that those that are in the great treatise are in a fundamentally different order, illustrate the uniqueness of Tsongkhapa's presentation of special insight. I'm just highlighting this. It's really premature because we're not getting to that study for quite some time, but it's one of the great values and one of the points that Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasized, that we gain a really deep appreciation for the teachings on emptiness, in particular in the light of the teachings on the two truths. In this new exposition, he presents at length the two truths, obscurational or conventional truths, and ultimate truth, from the viewpoint of Chandrakirti's middle way consequence school, with particular emphasis on, and there's a whole number of topics that he goes into, but essentially he gives a really rich presentation that I think you'll find of great value. Hopefully we'll all be here to study it when that comes along. Tsongkhapa also cites passages from Nagarjuna's 60 stanzas of reasoning to show that emptiness is approached through the reasoning of dependent arising, which, as most of you know, is one of the most profound ways to approach realizing emptiness. That nirvana also is empty of inherent existence, that Buddhas perceive conventional phenomena, and he explains passages in these two texts by Nagarjuna as his praises, that his collection of praises is harmonious with his collection of reasonings in terms of the view of reality. There are some people who debate that Nagarjuna wasn't teaching the middle way view all the time, but he actually makes that clear, that Nagarjuna, this great master who Tsongkhapa was on the shoulders of that giant, he was teaching in line with the middle way view throughout his entire corpus of works. So just to conclude, Pabongka Rinpoche said that meditating on Lamrim is more meaningful than seeing a Buddha. By seeing a Buddha, you don't become enlightened without meditating on Lamrim, Rinpoche says. You have to have realizations. All the delusions do not go like that. You have to have the realization of Guru devotion, the route to the path to enlightenment, that which makes it possible to have all the realizations up to enlightenment. renunciation of the delusions, in particular, attachment, then the right view, realizing emptiness, which eliminates ignorance, then bodhicitta, which eliminates the self-cherishing thought. So we need these realizations and to actualize the generation stage and the completion stage of highest yoga tantra. Because again, the tantric teachings are taught as an extension of the Mahayana, as I pointed out earlier. The sutra teachings, the Paramitayana, and then the Vajrayana, the tantric teachings, to help us to get to enlightenment. Just as Lama Tsongkhapa says in one of his texts, to train, one needs to hear many teachings, then one should reflect repeatedly on them, and then meditate on them. In this way, one should dedicate all one's energy to preserving the teachings of the Buddha. This is from my teacher, Geshe Jampa Gyatso. When we started the master's program that I studied in from 98 through the end of 2004. But again, he's just really emphasizing that this is the process. There's the hearing, the wisdom we gain through hearing many teachings, such as this course, and studying the Lamrim, reading the text, and so on. Then secondly, the wisdom that arises through reflection, reflecting, thinking, contemplating on them repeatedly. And then finally, by meditating on them with a very focused mind that will allow one to attain realizations. So, that's why we need to do this work. In regard to listening or studying the teachings, there's an expression by the Kadampa Lamas. Kadampa Lamas are those that followed in Atisha's footsteps 1,000 years ago, who were meditator practitioners. And that saying says, meditating without listening to teachings is like someone who tries to climb a rock face with their hands closed. So, I've never tried to climb a rock face myself, but can you imagine, if you had your fist closed, well, then you wouldn't be able to do much, right? Because you can't sort of grab onto anything. And so the idea is if we sit down to meditate, but we don't have an idea of what we're going to grab onto in terms of our thoughts that we want to investigate and to realize, then what's the point of meditating? You can gain some incredible, focus of mind and what have you through meditation, but we really need to do something more with our meditation. And I'll talk more about meditation in the classes to come. Most of you have a background in it, so I don't need to spend much time on it. But this is a class that is intended to help you to meditate on the Lamrim and have that meditation be more effective. The third thing I wanted, well, let me see if there's questions before I go on. Questions on any of that presentation? Yes, Cynthia, please. Hello, Cynthia. You can unmute and we can all hear you here. Yeah. Still, one thing you can also do, I know that it's a kind of a pain, you can hold on to your space bar on a computer if you have a computer in front of you, and then that will allow you.
Yeah,
Oh, there you go.
Sorry. Hi, Don. Thank you for your teaching. I just want to have some understanding of how the Pali canon relates to this texts that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote. Because I understand that that's what they call original teachings.
I don't claim to be an expert around all of this history of the Buddha's teachings, but my understanding is that the Pali canon is primarily derived from the initial turning of the wheel of Dharma that the Buddha gave, which are primarily the teachings on the Four Noble Truths and setting out to a large degree the path to liberation, but the path to enlightenment, to Buddhahood, is also there in not quite an overt way. The Sanskrit teachings that are more a part of the Mahayana tradition do encompass what is in the Pali canon. It's just that they are a different body of work, but certainly include the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path and so on, all these wonderful things that are taught in the Pali canon. Just the Pali canon, it doesn't seem to go as far into some of the teachings, particularly on emptiness, that the Mahayana teachings do, the Sanskrit teachings. So the Pali canon is definitely a part of all of it. It's not in any way excluded. And that's actually a bodhisattva vow that we take, is to not have that sort of separation of thinking the Hinayana is in any way inferior or less than or outside of the teachings of the Buddha, but rather is encompassed in our practice. And in fact, we're going to see this when we get to the greatness of this text and its approach, that this allows us to include in these three levels everything the Buddha taught, so that we're never making the mistake of excluding anything. So everything that's kind of encompassed within the Pali canon and that tradition is included. in the Lamrim and in the Mahayana teachings. So it's not, again, down to the word. We're not talking about everything, every single word of the Pali Canon is included. We mean the main teachings that are there, that are practiced by those who are perhaps in the Theravadan tradition, as we have it now, tend to study more the Pali Canon. But those core teachings are all definitely included. Okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah. Yes, George, please. Good to see you from Brazil. You can unmute. There you go.
Okay. I have a question. First, I'm glad to see you. Happy New Year for all of us. I have a question about this proposition, recognizing this perfect human rebirth. So, what do you mean by that? It's the aware that it's not one life that we're living, but a life. So that the body is not we all have. There is a continuity of the conscience without the body. But if it is just this knowledge, it's just a belief that I have, or there's something more practical that I can do to retain this awareness.
You know what? I don't want to go too deeply into the topic because we will get to it as part of this first part of the course. But the idea again is that this is an important thing as a starting point to a large degree, is we have to recognize that this sort of continuity of awareness that is in this life together with this human body, with various other conditions. It's not just being born human, because there are many beings that are human on this planet, right? 7 point whatever billion human beings. Not all of them have what we call a perfect or precious human rebirth, because not all of them have these additional conditions that make this life something that can be utilized in a very profound way. So when we get to that topic, we're going to be looking at the various it's divided into 3 parts. The first is, what do we really mean by that? And so we'll get into that in much more detail. What does it mean to have this perfect human rebirth? This little window of opportunity where we have a human existence and have met with the Dharma and are interested in it and so on. Secondly, what are the causes of this that, allow us to have the opportunity to be able to, engage in this? And then thirdly, what's the value of it? What can we do with it? Having attained this and what have you, well then, what can we hope to accomplish with this existence that is so rich and rare? So I'll get into that in much more detail, but the idea is that sets the stage for the rest of the Lamrim, because the 3 levels proceed from that. If this is the life that I have, in fact, maybe I'll go ahead and share this quote right here. I was going to share it at some point. It's a wonderful quote from one of the commentaries, really the only published English commentary on the middle length Lamrim. As it says there, this is by essentially by Pabanka Rinpoche, as notes taken by his disciple Tridang Rinpoche are written down and translated into English here. We are extremely fortunate to have obtained our present human form. And if we don't take the opportunity to extract some essence from it, but instead squander it, it will be extremely rare to obtain such a human life again. The previous Kadampas would say that obtaining this life of leisure and endowment is like rolling a copper boulder halfway up a mountain. And it's kind of like the myth of Sisyphus, right? You get it halfway up the mountain. You want to make sure you continue. We strive for the means of this life's happiness, such as amassing wealth, resources, and so on, which is not the meaning of extracting the essence of this life of leisure and endowment. Although we may have strength, power, and dominance like a Chakravartin king, a wheel-turning king, this is also not its essence. Well then, how do I extract its essence? You must extract its essence by listening, contemplating, and meditating, those 3 things I just mentioned that Geshe Jampa Gyatso said, on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Once you train your mind in this, if you then develop the realizations of a being of small scope, you will have extracted its least essence. If you develop the realizations of a being of the middle scope, you will have extracted its middling essence. If you develop the realizations of a being of great scope, you will have extracted its supreme essence. So that's the context for this, is that we come to appreciate this human life that we have because we see it's rich with the opportunity to deepen our awareness of the Dharma through those various levels. So this is all on the horizon coming. I hope that gives you enough of a taste. And then, George, I appreciate you coming in from Brazil and joining us tonight. Yeah. Scarlett, you did put a note in here about your unmuting you. I hit this button that says ask to unmute, but I'm not sure I can unmute. Maybe Shayla, can you have the ability to unmute Scarlett? Oh, there she's unmuted.
It's off. I don't know what's happening, so hopefully.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect.
Can hear you. I can hear you now. Yes. Thanks.
Hello, Don. I just wanted to just get an idea. I just kind of bought a book on the Lamrim, and I wanted to know that there is a recommended book. The recommended book, are we going to be like every session have like readings to do, or is this book just sort of like read at our leisure that you're recommended? Because I am happy to get this book that you are recommended for the course.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that that's the main text that we're going to be going to in every class. Now, I will be putting it on the screen. I've got the Kindle version, and so I will be showing it on the screen so that we can all see the passage that I'm going to be commenting on. But I think you'll find it useful if you have your own copy. Again, whether you do an electronic version or a print version, that's entirely up to you. But something that you can review and go through, because that's the whole purpose, is that the Lamrim is meant to kind of stay active and vibrant in your mind and to use it in meditation and what have you. So you can also find it useful to read ahead, and sometimes look at, well, oh, Don's going to be teaching on this next part. Let me read ahead and get a kind of an idea of what sorts of topics are in that section. So I'll talk a little bit more about the text in that in just a moment, but thanks for asking that, Scarlett. I'm
Sure.
curious, can you let me know what Lamrim book you purchased?
Yeah, I'm gonna get it, and then maybe I can put my hand up back again when I have it, if that's okay.
Okay, that'll be
Okay,
fine. Okay,
sure. I'll
thank you.
get it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one handout that I didn't make available to people is one I put together for Lamrim courses in general, and I think maybe I will try to revise it because there's a few new texts. It's like almost every published Lamrim that I've seen or commentary on a Lamrim. I'm sure I'm missing some, but it's kind of a couple of page document that really gives an idea of all the various texts that are out there. But shall we move on to the next topic, which again is I really just do want to have some opportunity to look at these documents that are out there, so you have an idea of just like we were talking with Scarlett's question, what are the materials? How do you use them? What have you? I think this is what I want to share. When you register, which again, I hope you have registered through the link that is on the page at Thupten Oberling Buddhist Center's website, you will get a link to the materials. Maybe it's even there. I'm not sure. Is it there? No, you have to register to get it. Okay. So please do register. What you'll get is a link to my Google Drive where I will be updating materials. I've divided this FPMT basic program stages of the path into, again, 4 parts. So right now I'm only working with part 1 out there. Part 1 has 5 folders now. It will have a 5th folder that will have the presentation slides, and it may have some additional folders as we add additional materials. The basic information, well, actually, this is the charts. I don't necessarily need to look at the charts at this point. I will point out when you might want to refer to the charts, but there's these wonderful, very colorful charts that have been put together by various other basic programs. These are not things I did. I don't have this kind of talent. But anyway, you might find that useful at various stages of your study. I will let you know when those charts become more relevant, so you don't need to necessarily do much with that. The second folder is general course materials. This is where you find the course outline and the reading list. So for tonight, for example, the course outline shows that we are doing the introduction to the text and the study of the stages of the path, which I touched on. I want to hopefully get to the expression of veneration and the vow of composition, which is the very beginning of our text, and then the identification of the Dharma to be explained. And then starting next week, we will go on to some of the main chapter headings, the greatness of the author, the greatness of the text, and so on. You'll notice that for each of theirs, there's a reading assignment that is really, in essence, for the next session, a following session. So this is useful if you would like to take a look at our main text that we have, the middle length treatise, and actually prepare by reading ahead. And you don't have to do that. I also have highlighted a couple of other Lamrim texts that you might find useful to accompany your studies. Those are completely optional, though. And what I've done is I put this together with every session, kind of what I'm planning to cover. We may have some overlap, sometimes when I don't get through all of that, but this is the main plan that I'm kind of relying on. You'll notice that there are a few times where I have a class that is not happening in March and February. For example, February 18th, we're going to have a Losar Puja here that I will be leading, and I'll be still here, but we won't be having a class. You're welcome to come in for that. Losar is Tibetan New Year. Then I will be traveling in California and teaching, and the only opportunity on a Wednesday night that I have to teach there is March 4th. So I will teach from California then. But this class is I'm planning it to go to April 15th. And I've got the last two sessions kind of planned for catch up and or review. Knowing me and how long it takes me to explain things sometimes, just the way I like to do things, I'm pretty sure I'll need that extra time. But this class, again, just gives an outline of what I'm intending to cover. In terms of those texts, to go into a little more detail, what I have here as the required text is, especially if you are taking this as an intention to gain some form of certification, please do purchase the text, do have it that you can make kind of do your own highlighting of and access to and what have you, notes on it and so on. Again, there is a file in the text folder that will give you information about how to obtain a discounted price if you get it from Wisdom Publications. Another text that you might find useful is the first volume of the Great Treatise. Again, what he's doing in the middle length is to some extent condensing what's in the Great Treatise. But if you are curious about the Great Treatise and what additional citations and things are in there, you might find that useful to go through. There are also a few commentaries on the stages of the path. One suggested text, these are not required by any means, is The Steps on the Path to Enlightenment, which is a 5-volume series that are commentaries by this amazing Geshe Lundop Zopa, who was one of Lama Zopa's teachers. Many of you are familiar with this 5-volume series. What we are covering is entirely within the first volume. If you want to have the amazing expertise of Geshe Sopa at your fingertips, I highly recommend it. It's quite wonderful. The other suggested text is a text that I quoted from earlier, that little quote with the pink highlighting that I had on the screen. That's from The Essence of the Vast and Profound, which is a rather long book. It's this little book here. I don't know if those folks who are online, maybe I can take it off screen for a moment. Again, this is available from Lama or Wisdom Publications, and it may be available cheaper in other places, but essentially it's a nice thick commentary written by Pabanka Rinpoche. Not essential, but nonetheless, you'll find it may be useful to use. It might be worth pointing out that that text actually is using middle length Lamrim as the main text, but he interweaves some teachings from Essence of Refined Gold that, again, Geshe Sherab taught on earlier this year, or last year, I'm sorry. It's 2026 now. And then the third text is The Swift Path, which there is also an English translation of by my dear friend Ziggy To, who it's kind of a bit even more of a meditation manual. Scarlett, you got your hand up. You were going to perhaps show us the text that you purchased.
Yes, the book I
Great.
got, it's called Practicing the Path by Yancy Rinpoche. I recently bought it. So
Yes. It's a wonderful text of commentary by Yangtze Rinpoche, who runs our Maitripa College. It's the main teacher up there. And it's his commentary on the Lamrim Chenmo. So it is on the Great Treatise, but it's very valuable. Again, that's one of them on my longer list of Lamrim texts, but it's a wonderful book. It's going to match up certainly in terms of the content, but because he's commenting on the Great Treatise, there will be times when it might diverge a little bit. But good.
Oh, I understand. Okay, well, thank you for the clarification, and I will definitely get the book that you're suggesting. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Thank you, Scarlett. Appreciate it. let's go back to that, and I'll just go through very briefly the remaining texts. The other three that are listed here, they're actually the same text. Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand is one translation by Wisdom Publications. The book has been divided into three parts, and the two parts that you would need for if you want to do a alternate translation of Liberation in the Palm of Your Hands by Pavanka Rinpoche, I find that one really rich because it has a lot more footnotes and things to it. Anyway, many of you have studied Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. If you studied Discovering Buddhism, the FPMT's program Discovering Buddhism uses that as its main text. So don't feel like you have to do these additional readings or have these additional texts. Focusing on just this text, and maybe if you do have the desire to do one commentary, it might be useful. There's not such a big difference between Geshe Sopa's commentary, at that level. When it gets to the final sections of the Lamrim, it is going to be quite different. I might point out that there are two really wonderful biographies of Lama Tisha and Tsongkhapa, Lama Tsongkhapa, that are published by Shambhala that are part of their Lives of the Masters series. I unfortunately haven't read them completely, but I've read a good share of each of these, and they're really, really rich and wonderful. Sometimes some of you might find it really inspiring to read about these masters who we're, again, relying upon and whose works we're studying. The last thing is something I will focus on a little bit further in, Meditations on the Stages of the Path. There's a wonderful book that Kathleen McDonald put together that gives the topics that we're going to be going through, guided meditations on those. Those are all written. There's also the Lamrim Year, which is a free publication of Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives that you can access. And I may be able to even put that out there. I think it's free. If it's free, I'll be happy to put it out there on the drive so you can access it, but you can also get it from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives website. Then the last is Guided Meditations on the Stages of the Path, the book by Venerable Thupten Chodron, and it also includes access to over 14 hours of audio guided meditations in MP3. If you prefer that type of approach of having someone guide you through meditations on the Lamrim, that can be useful. But again, I'm going to talk more about Lamrim meditation as we go deeper into the text. Every week, I will generally post a homework questions and give you even the homework answers. Please look at the questions before you look at the answers. I know the order here is the opposite on the screen. But for this week, I went ahead and put the first ones, but we haven't even gotten to any of the material here. So you're not going to really know the answers to these necessarily because I haven't given the commentary. But essentially, this will also be what we use when we do the last half-hour discussion in general, okay? So this is something that, again, I will post in advance of that class, maybe a couple of days before. So you will have it if you do want to take a look at the questions that are coming up and keep those in mind as you go through the reading. Again, the homework answers I'm giving you because I don't believe in kind of, not giving people information to study with. Sometimes I don't have time to put together all the answers for various texts, but it is good for people to have something they can refer to when you get to the point where you're studying for the test on this first part. I also have another document that gives some useful guides for meditation that I think was kind of the prototype for the book that I mentioned that Venerable Sangye Kadro put together. This was put together by Venerable Birgit, who was a classmate of mine in the master's program. But it kind of gives the outlines of the various sections of the Lamrim so that you can then use those as a guide in your meditation. There's also some prayers that I'm recommending that you use in your meditation on the Lamrim. And I think I forgot to put one of the prayers out there, but this is, again, something I will talk about later. And maybe, we can do that at some point when we do some meditation sessions together. In regard to the text, this is just that document that shows how you would obtain the text at a discount. And that's it. Those are the things I have out there now. And again, I will continue to add materials there, anything, the new homework, what have you, anything that comes up that I want to share with all of you. So any questions on that? Okay, we do have a little bit of time then. We've got about 20 minutes to take a look at the text. What I want to do, I did already kind of cue it up to oops, why is it doing that? There we go. Cue it up to the start of the section that I would be commenting on, but I think it's worthwhile to maybe go back to the table of contents. You're welcome certainly to read the preface and to read this wonderful little foreword by Ling Rinpoche, His Eminence Ling Rinpoche. But this is the kind of outline of the text that fits very neatly once more into the way that we are going about this course. The preliminaries are everything we're going to cover in this first part. We're going to go next week into the greatness of the author, meaning Lama Atisha, the greatness of the Dharma, listening to and explaining the Dharma. We carry on, session by session, relying on a teacher. We'll talk a bit about the meditation session and how we make that most effective. Precious human rebirth, or what's called here the freedoms and endowments of this life. And then segueing kind of in a brief way into the remaining part of the text, the paths of the three types of persons. Then we go on, what we'll start in course 2 is with the stages that are shared with the persons of lower or lesser capacity. Death and future lives, refuge in the three jewels, karma and its effects. And then we go on, and this will still be within that second course, the stages shared with the persons of medium or middling capacity. Suffering, contemplating the various ways the Buddha presented suffering or dukkha, the mental afflictions that are the cause of our dukkha, and then cyclic existence and liberation, how we actually go about practicing the 3 higher trainings and so on. That will be the conclusion to the second part of this course. The third part of this course will begin with the stages of the person of great capacity, where we learn about entering into the Mahayana through the mind of bodhicitta. We learn the instructions on how we actually attain that mind, the ritual for adopting it through adopting the bodhisattva vows as well, and guarding one's bodhicitta in that way. Then we look at the perfections, the 6 paramitas, generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, meditative stabilization, and wisdom, as well as what are called the 4 ways of gathering disciples. That will conclude the third part, where we look at the perfections in a very general way. The last 2 perfections, meditative stabilization and wisdom, there's a whole section again. And when I was talking about Tsongkhapa's unique presentation of the special insight section, that's the teachings on wisdom. So we see, again, this is what we're going to be going into in the 4th part. Shamatha, the state of calm abiding, single-pointed mind, and special insight, looking at how we practice shamatha, how we accomplish it, and then how we practice special insight and all the teachings that go through there, including the teachings on the 2 truths that I alluded to earlier. So that's in brief, where we're going in terms of the 4 courses. Gives you, again, the lay of the land so that we can proceed from there. Let's go ahead and look at the preliminaries, and let's do a little commentary on the text. So this section starts with the greatness of the author, but what I want to cover tonight, if I've got time, is just these first few paragraphs, the beginning there and this verse of homage and a promise to compose, and then the next paragraph. Respectfully I prostrate at the feet of those venerable holy beings filled with compassion. So Lama Tsongkhapa starts with a kind of an homage, a way of paying homage to those, quote, venerable, meaning that they are beings who have adopted the good morality and all the other qualities that make them venerable, that they are holy beings who have, again, attained realizations and developed their minds in the direction of Buddhahood, if not actually attained that state. And then these are beings that are filled with compassion. And by compassion here, we don't just mean the ordinary compassion that many, many beings have, right? Most beings have some level of compassion for someone in their life or certain beings who are suffering. People who own pets, for example, have a great compassion for their pets. And if they're dealing with any sort of illness, they will do whatever they can to help their pets get the treatment and so on. When we talk about compassion, that word there is shorthand for what we often refer to as great compassion. Great compassion is where we elevate our compassion to the desire to do something about the suffering of others, to actually be the agent of helping beings to be free from suffering. So this is, again, when we are paying homage at the very beginning of this text, Lama Tsongkhapa's words of homage to these venerable holy beings who are filled with compassion. They are filled with great compassion, meaning that they are of a Mahayana nature. They are beings who are not just concerned that others are suffering. They are concerned enough to want to do something about that. We're going to encounter great compassion much, much more when we get to the third part of this course. But nonetheless, it's going to come up here and there because this is the path that we are on, the path of the Bodhisattva that is motivated by great compassion. Some of you attended some of my teachings about Chandrakirti's praise to great compassion that I did in December. There will be a final class of that I couldn't do because I was sick in December, the final session. That'll be coming up in February. Anyway, he has then a wonderful verse. The first three colors there are divided in terms of the beings that are being paid homage to. But we have essentially an homage in those first three parts, pink, orange, and yellow. And then the blue part is what's often called a promise to compose. These are often very traditional parts of almost any text that is a treatise, commentary, to kind of think of beings who are much greater than oneself and who one wants to pay homage to. And then secondly, to make a determination that you will do whatever it takes to put forward the subject matter that you feel you want to convey in that text. And Lama Tsongkhapa did this when he composed this text back in 1415. So let's look at the very first line. He singles out to begin with, Blessed One, Lord of this endurance world, or this world of forbearance, it's sometimes called. The idea is that this is a challenging world that we're living in. These are degenerate times even that the Buddha appeared in. We often think of degenerate times perhaps referring to our 21st century and things that are going on in our world. But this has always been part of a degenerate age. This is in Buddhist cosmology. There's these huge overarching things that are happening in terms of the abiding of a particular world system and what have you. Degeneration means that there's essentially a proliferation of a lot of delusion, a lot of things in our world. Well, the Buddha, who is referred to there, let me get my other text out so I can refer to it as, again, the Blessed One, Lord of this endurance world. Blessed One, or kind of this epithet that they're giving to the Buddha. There are many epithets for the Buddha, right? Of the Bhagawan, the Tathagata, all of these things are ways to talk about the beings who have attained that state. And here we're talking in particular about Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha who appeared, again, some 2,600 years ago, who began the turning of the wheel of Dharma in our world system. He's not the only Buddha. He is a Buddha that ripened, the times ripened, the conditions ripened for him to appear in this world, to begin disseminating the Dharma in this world that it requires great endurance and forbearance, again, due to the degenerations that we experience in this world. So essentially, he's the big guy, the first point, right? Everyone generally begins by paying some sort of homage to the Buddha because that's the source of the teachings in our time in this world. Okay, so then we have two other individuals who actually appeared as bodhisattvas in the retinue of the Buddha. There were these 8 great bodhisattvas. 2 of them were first Buddha's regent, Maitreya, who's the Lord of the Dharma. And then secondly, Manjughosha, or Manjushri, as he's often called, the sole father of those gone to bliss. Again, another epithet for the Buddhas, Sugatas, those gone to bliss. So essentially, we have 2 beings who are actually said to have been Buddhas. They appeared as bodhisattvas. And why did they do that? So that they could exemplify what perfect bodhisattvas look like to bodhisattva practitioners who were kind of admiring that path and wanting to pursue that path. Remember, when the Buddha came, he was teaching to a variety of disciples. He was teaching the individual vehicle, the way to attain one's own liberation. He was teaching the universal vehicle, how to attain complete Buddhahood. He was teaching the tantric path as well. He was teaching all of these things, and he was teaching according to the dispositions of particular beings. Well, for those who have a predisposition to follow the Mahayana, to want to become a Buddha, they needed more examples of what it looks like to be a bodhisattva. So they had these folks, Manjushri, Maitreya, Avalokiteshvara, Ksitigarbha, It was four others. I can't remember all the names right now. Anyway, another one just came to me and then went. Anyway, sorry, I didn't prepare those 8 ahead of time. I'm sorry, I'm not fully prepared. But these bodhisattvas were actually Buddhas who appeared in the form of a bodhisattva, Samantabhadra. Again, they gave this kind of example of how to practice that path. Now, they're not known in just that light, because it's actually said that there are two main bodies of the Buddha's teachings that they became kind of the bearers of, the lineage holders of. These two bodies of teachings apply to essentially the teachings that are more conventional in nature, what are called the vast practices, the vast conduct that is required to kind of become enlightened, as well as to attain the other results the Buddha taught. And then we have the profound view, which is the profound view of emptiness that is essential to attaining those goals. Remember, many of you have heard this teaching where essentially we can say there are two main elements of our path, just like a bird has two wings in order to fly. We have that method side that includes these vast practices. For the Bodhisattva, it includes, developing bodhicitta and the practice of the six perfections, as well as all the other teachings of the lower stages of the path that they have to practice and engage in. All of that feeds into a part of the path, but they need the profound view. They need the teachings on emptiness to attain their final goals. And especially to attain Buddhahood, we need to have that wisdom that is perfect in terms of the correct view and understanding of emptiness. Well, what it said is the Buddha, as the main carrier of both of those bodies of teaching, disseminated primarily the path of the vast practices to Maitreya Buddha, and the profound view of emptiness to Manjushri. So these two became kind of the lineage holders, if you will, of those two teachings. Even though, again, they were already enlightened beings, they were beings who held the continuity of those teachings for others to access. Now, who were the people mainly who accessed them? Nagarjuna and Asanga. Nagarjuna is said to have lived right around the beginning of the Common Era. Asanga was a few centuries after that. There are lots of information that you can find about those beings. I'm not going to go into that in great detail. But they were both foretold by the Buddha, the victor. Again, so he's bringing to mind these two beings, as well as Maitreya, Manjushri, and the Buddha. Why Nagarjuna and Asanga? Because they were the ones who primarily benefited from those two lineages. Nagarjuna had a strong connection to Manjushri, and Asanga had a strong connection to Maitreya Buddha. Again, I could go into more stories about all of that, but that's the essence of this lineage that we are looking at. We're looking at the Buddha disseminating to his two main bodhisattva disciples of Maitreya and Manjushri, and then them respectively passing those two main bodies of teaching to Asanga and Nagarjuna. So this is why these are being paid homage to. Now, that's not to say that these are the only beings involved in the entirety of Buddhist teachings in this world or in the Lamrim, but these are the main ones. These are the heavy hitters. It's also said that Nagarjuna is the main proponent of the middle way view that we are going to be studying, and that is so key to finding the profound view. Asanga, on the other hand, became a main they call it a charioteer, kind of setting out that track of what's come to be known as the mind-only school, which is different from the middle way. Won't go into that quite so much for quite some time, but those two beings played a very primary role in terms of a lot of the Mahayana teachings that followed from the Buddha's presence. And then, of course, Manjushri and Maitreya disseminating those two main branches. That kind of concludes his homage. He says then, in terms of a vow to compose, I will here explain once more in a summary fashion the stages of the path of profound view, which again was what Manjushri disseminated to Nagarjuna, having received that from the Buddha, and then the vast conduct, which is again the lineage of all of those practices that Maitreya received from the Buddha and passed on to Asanga. And he is doing that for the sake of making them easy to access. So he's already saying here in this promise to compose that he has this kind of intention of helping these teachings to be easier to access. But the idea is that already have been incredibly simplified in terms of their access previous to this. But once more, the middle length Lamrim does make them much easier for us to kind of get our heads around and work with. So this is, again, just the first two components of a text that are usually there, started with that initial homage to all of those beings who are venerable, holy beings and that are, filled with compassion, and then went on to delineate particular beings that are really key figures. Again, I didn't point out Nagarjuna and Asanga in my little chart of people, but they are really amazing in terms of the discourses that they did, treatises they wrote on the Buddha's teachings, especially Nagarjuna, who has come to be relied upon for that view of emptiness that we study. I think that's good enough for tonight, and then we will start again, pick up the text there. So the course will generally look like that. When we come in, we will do our initial prayers. We'll do a little meditation. And then I will lead you through some section of the text, again, according to the plan that I had set out. And let's hope that I can kind of keep up with that. But if not, again, we do have a little time at the end to catch up. And then we will have a short break, about an hour and a half into the session, and do a little discussion based on the quiz homework questions that I provided you with. All right. Wow, it was a lot of talking. I rarely do 2-hour sessions. I'm usually doing an hour and a half. So anyway, last chance for questions tonight. Is there anything anyone wanted to ask tonight? How will our homework be graded? What I would encourage you to do with the homework is to primarily use it as a tool for your own study. So what you might do, here's a suggestion, is that if I have covered all the questions, and let's say next week I do get to all 4 questions that are in the homework, that you then go home, do some additional study and review of what notes you've taken or, the text, what have you, looking at it. And then when you find that it's a convenient time, you can sit down. And if you even want to have the book in front of you, that's fine. But essentially go through the homework and answer the questions. And then you can take a look at the answers yourself. I would really prefer not to be grading homework so much, because it's hard enough to manage all of the putting together everything. And I want it to be, something that you can work on yourselves and do. The advantage for those of you who stay for a discussion is that you'll have already looked at these questions. Hopefully you've got enough time to look at least through a few of them, and you'll have discussed them with others, and other people will say, oh, what I heard was this, and I think this is the answer to that or whatever. And then you'll have some idea already. So it's not really like pop quizzes or anything like that, where I'm expecting people to, spit out answers on the basis of just, your own memory or what have you. These are tools to help you to study. And so if you review after each class and after each discussion, the questions that pertain to what I taught, then there's hopefully another layer where you're bringing the material in and working with it. All right. So I really don't want to get into grading. If you would like to send them to me, you're welcome to do so. I may take a look at them and just say, keep up the good work or something, but I really don't want to get into a whole grading thing of it, because it just becomes another layer of stuff. Is that all right with everyone? Sorry if I'm disappointing anyone by that. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead. If there are no other questions, any other questions? Yes, we have one in the Gompe here. What format are the documents in? You'll find that I am putting the quizzes, or I'm sorry, I keep calling them quizzes because that's what I used to call them, homework. I'm doing the homework and the homework answers in Word. Everything else I think is PDF. So why I did that in Word is because some people like to get on the computer and do it. And if you don't have that Acrobat, Pro or whatever, then you can't go into a PDF document and modify things. So anyway, but that's the reason why I did those in that format. But everything else I think is PDF. Even, the PowerPoint slides that I shared tonight, for example, I will put them out there in a PDF format for those of you who don't have access to PowerPoint. I don't know if that's many people, but anyway. Anything else before we conclude? You can ask questions again next week too. Don't feel like you have to get them in tonight. So. All right. Before we do our closing prayers, I just want to say how excited I am that we have so many people, and I hope that you all kind of stick in there. It's certainly, a different level of study than what some of you might be used to, but engage in it once more in whatever way is comfortable for you so that it becomes something that you enjoy. One Dharma teacher I had said that if you're studying the Dharma and it isn't fun, then you're doing it all wrong. So that's another way to look at this, is it should be fun. It should be something enjoyable. While the topics we're looking at are often very serious, we want to make sure that we do it with a mind that's very light and enjoying our study of the Dharma. So let's do our dedication prayers. We'll do these all in English. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Then we like to do prayers for our teachers, especially for His Holiness to have good health, long life, that his wishes be fulfilled. As we recite that, we can think of having the same results for all of our other teachers who are still with us in this world. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Then, as most of you know, I'm sure, we're still trying to create the causes for Rinpoche's reincarnation to be identified. Having passed away almost 3 years ago, it is said that it has occurred. We just have not yet found that young child who is the embodiment of Rinpoche's consciousness in this world. So we can make prayers for that as we recite these verses together. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. All right, and then we make a final dedication for anyone we're holding in our hearts, beings, individuals that we know, or places in the world where there's great suffering and strife. Send this positive energy out to them so they can be free from their suffering in this moment. And that these beings may also find a path that leads to true happiness and peace. And may all beings have these same results through what we've done here together tonight. Again, thank you. Not too bad. 9:02 here. So again, there won't be quite as much lecture in the classes going forward, but I hope you can join us going forward and we'll have some fun together with this text. Thanks so much, everyone. And again, thank you, Venerable Dundrup, for all of your kind support. Okay, be well. Have a good week.